Hey everyone, Ben Coomber Radio episode, don't know, I'll be honest, I absolutely don't know. I don't know when this is going to go out, but it's going out now because you're listening to it live. Maybe you're in your car, maybe you're having a walk, doesn't matter. Either way, hope you're having an awesome day. Before we do start today's show, let me just remind you that if you need clarification in any way, you need help in the realm of supplements, then please do look at Awesome Supplements. I apologise that our vegan stock is struggling to stay in stock. It's taking the vegan world by storm, it seems. We can't get it in quick enough. I'm trying to order more. It's not as easy as it seems, but thank you for everyone to supporting that, which is cool because most vegan proteins taste like rubbish, and it's lucky to see that we've nailed it. And if you're looking for more information outside of this podcast, don't forget the Body Type Nutrition blog, where there's loads of different things that you can read up. Again, there's so many different blogs there. There's so many different free ebooks. Get on there, have a root around, spend some time on a lazy Sunday morning with a cup of coffee and kind of get some brain gains. Anyway, today's show, what is going on? Now, we talk about weight regulation an awful lot. Obviously, it's a key thing that we all want to know about. That's probably why we got interested in nutrition. We've got a journey, a background, something that makes us think about our weight, whether it's fat, whether it's muscle, whether it's athleticism, it all ties in. Now, we've talked a lot on the calorie equation before on this podcast. We've talked about how it's key, how it is the primary determining factor of whether we are going to gain, lose or maintain our weight, and how we manage that in terms of our calorie balance is obviously all individual. You can count calories, you don't have to count calories, you do whatever you want. But there are other things that control our weight. And we're going to look at that today. We're going to look at when the scenario that's presented into us isn't always black and white. And today, to help me with that conversation, I have on the show the PCOS Nutritionist Claire Goodwin. Hello, Claire.
Hello, Ben. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me on the show. Now, you are not of native tongue. I say native tongue because I am a Brit. You do not sound like a Brit. Claire, where are you from?
I'm from one of the colonies, from the New Zealand colony. So just to be clear, so you don't get that mixed up with the Australian one. But I've been living in London for about 3 years, but unfortunately haven't left any of my accent behind, so it seems.
When you say colonies, it makes you sound like you've literally just come out of the bush, you found some clothes and you got a flight over to London. Yeah,
it's still, not wearing a grass skirt or, it's not still riding my horse around. So thank goodness I've been civilized by coming over here.
So as the PCOS nutritionist, which is, a niche area, but I will be 100% upfront with you. I only recently found out how prominent PCOS is. I didn't realise the percentage of people with it is so high.
Yeah, it's 1 in 10, but they're starting to say 1 in 5 in the UK. So, we can say 10 to 20% of females living in the UK right now have got polycystic ovarian syndrome.
Now, I want to start with a key question. Has that statistic changed over the years? Because I'm wondering if there's environmental factors pushing that equation up.
Absolutely. I think there's two things here. One is the diagnostic criteria has widened, so that's meaning that more women are being put into that bracket. And so PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, is a syndrome. So it's like irritable bowel syndrome. It's not one disease. It's kind of where they group symptoms together and put you in a bucket so that they can understand what's going on better. So there's a lot of different types and causes, but so that's why the diagnostic criteria isn't fixed set, and it has moved. But also, absolutely agree with you. There is definitely an environmental component here, like all modern chronic illnesses, diabetes, obesity, etc. This is an epigenetic effect. It's definitely a genetic component, but obviously as well, environment turning those genes on and causing the body to overproduce female body to overproduce testosterone and androgens, which is the key criteria for PCOS.
Right. I need to stop there and rewind because people might be sitting there going, that's great, Ben. Who's Claire? Claire, let's add some background.
Okay.
You've got a big background in overtraining, undereating, struggling to understand the problems that you had with your weight and with your health. So let's paint a picture.
Absolutely. So my background, so I was a international runner, so I competed for New Zealand for many years in cross-country athletics at World Championships, and then as I got more and more injured, I switched to triathlon, so I wasn't running so much, and then competed for New Zealand in triathlon as well. So that was probably between from when I was like 15 to 25 when I retired. But during that time, I always struggled with weight, and because running especially is such a weight dependent sport, meaning that the more, the extra few kilos that you're carrying is going to mean an extra few seconds on the finish line. That was always something that was really apparent to me that, and was more that I was so confused as to why all my competitors and teammates were able to maintain like a really lean athletic figure, and and I, doing the same amount of training and actually eating less, could not do that. And I think that's what got me so interested in studying nutrition and exercise science at university as well.
Okay, so where was the roadblock? Like, you had a lack of results. At what point did you go, right, okay, I need to turn this on its head, I need to find out? And what was the process of you kind of really coming to terms with what you needed to do and the kind of the answers? Yeah, so
it actually wasn't until my last World Championships when I was 24, 25. And we'd been, so at university I studied exercise science and nutrition, and in one of our labs, actually, physiology lab, we were actually doing blood glucose, and mine was quite high. And I said to our lecturer, I was like, this is really high considering I'm an athlete. Like, I sat through nutrition lectures and exercise science lectures about type 2 diabetes, and the dominant paradigm in type 2 diabetes is that it's a disease of the fat and lazy. People that are eating too many donuts and watching too much Love Island, like that is your typical, you've caused this disease. And that's what, and I sat there really smugly thinking, wow, this is something that I'm never going to have to worry about. And even in our clinic where we had patients coming in, type 2 diabetic patients, I was like, well, guys, this is kind of your own fault. So it was when I then had that blood glucose reading, I went to the doctor, and sure enough, I was extremely insulin resistant. I was 1 point off type 2 diabetes, and this was months before competing at my last World Championship. So I was exercising, I was training 20 hours a week. I was eating a really low-fat, low-calorie diet, and here I was with, really severe insulin resistance. And that's what really triggered me to go, okay, this is what we're learning at nutrition school, and this kind of exercise, calories in, calories out exercise and training isn't actually all the information. Yes, it's a huge part of it, but actually there's so much more going on there. And that's when I got into studying functional medicine from there. And that was really the turning point for me.
Okay. All right. So we've kind of hinted on where these problems can arise, because I want to kind of, as I go through this podcast, I want to make sure we kind of classify people almost. I don't want to put people into a box, but we need to say where this information is relevant for people and where it's not. Now, firstly, so let's take 80% of the population. 80% of the population should be able to exercise, eat well, sleep well, control their calorie intake, get good results.
Absolutely.
Now we need to wind back and say, right, there's this group of 20%, and then maybe that percentage widens depending on the different things that are going in on their body. So looking at hormones from a top-line perspective, give me a little bit of a blue sky so we can go down deeper of where hormones can become a problem. And if someone's sitting there in the car right now listening to this, how do they troubleshoot whether they need to go and look for a potential test or a solution with a practitioner that can help them through their kind of current roadblock?
Yeah, so what I would say is that the calorie equation is, it works unless there is a hormonal mechanism that overrides that. And the top kind of 3 hormones that I would say is that they are thyroid, insulin, and stress hormone cortisol. So this is really, so for most people, the calorie equation will work properly, will work absolutely fine. But there are, as you said, 20% of people where they will be, in a calorie deficit. They'll be eating, say, 400 to 500 calories less than what they are expending, and they're not losing weight. And in some cases, they're actually gaining weight. And that's the population that I'd be looking at. So instead of thinking, okay, I'm just not doing this right, or maybe I am eating more than what I should be, and then instead of actually decreasing that further, which is what most of us will do. So most of us will then, if we are doing that calorie deficit, then we'll just go, okay, well, this is not working, so therefore I need to eat less and exercise more. But actually, if it's a hormonal mechanism that's overriding that, that will actually exacerbate the issue, not solve that. So if that sounds like you, then the 3 that I would start to look at is thyroid, insulin, and cortisol, and we'll discuss those in a bit more detail.
So let's say someone's at that point, and the reason why I want to classify is I coach loads of people, and I coach people in big groups, and quite often someone, like, they'll come to you, Claire, they'll say, like, I've been trying to lose weight, I've been doing this, and this is where you as a nutritionist have to really probe all the dietes, because we go on about it in health and fitness, but consistency is really, really, really important. And I classically see a Monday to Friday dieter where they're doing great during the week, and at the weekend they do whatever they want. But because the key sort of thought process in their head is that they do the majority of things well, they don't see that the other small bits that can easily rack up can add up really quickly. And I'll tell you now, I was at a festival all weekend before recording this podcast. I got shit-faced all weekend, and trust me, I've gained some weight. Even though I was doing everything great all throughout the week, and I went and had loads of alcohol and ate what I wanted at a festival. That's fine, I own that decision, it's all good, but for some people, that might end up in being a bit of a blur, and I'm not saying people are going to festivals every weekend, it's an extreme context. So, if people have done all that stuff, Claire, and they're like, I'm really consistent, I just don't get it, do we have to be going to a GP? Do we need to go external to get a full hormone panel? What are the next steps for people to kind of break down the problem?
Yeah, so a lot of the tests can be done via your GP, but what I would say is that the medical world is very different to what we in the functional medicine world. So the functional medicine world is all about trying to treat the root cause of chronic illness. The medical world, they are treating symptoms and keeping people alive, and so it's kind of different strokes. So if you've got a serious condition that's life-threatening, or if I got hit by a bus, the medical world is, I would definitely want to get to the hospital because that is what they're fantastic at. But really what doctors have in their kit bag, or what they can do for us, is medication. And medication isn't necessarily going to sort out, and a lot of the time, the reason why some of these hormones have got out of balance. So there's always a reason why, and that's something that isn't necessarily going to be fixed by medication. So while there are some tests that can be performed by the GP, I would always look further and go to someone who's got more of a functional medicine approach. So actually looking at the root cause why. So a classic example of that as well is that there, sometimes the tests that are done in the medical world are not really not the full picture. So thyroid would be the classic there. So the normal test that's done for thyroid condition, they normally only do 1 at the start, and if that's out of balance, then they'll test more. And it's called thyroid stimulating hormone. It's not actually produced by the thyroid, it's produced by a part of your brain, so thyroid stimulating. It stimulates the thyroid to then produce thyroid hormone. So there's a negative feedback loop there, meaning that if you're not producing enough thyroid hormone, it'll tell your brain to stimulate more. So thyroid stimulating hormone should go up. But there's a couple of reasons why this is not a particularly good marker. So one is that an inflammatory condition, so when your immune system's chronically inflamed or chronically activated, that can actually artificially bring down TSH. So when it would normally look high, it now looks normal. And also there's been, so the reference range that the current laboratories are using is just too broad for TSH. So it's different by different country, and I think that's probably a good indicator that we don't know exactly what the range should be. But generally it's about 4.5 is the high end of the normal range, but there have been like at least 10 studies, and the new recommendation from the Endocrine Society in the US is that that needs to be brought down to 2.5. So there's a few reasons here why that's not necessarily a good marker. And so often you might think, okay, well, I've got all the symptoms of a thyroid condition. I'm, so that if this sounds like you might have really low mood, low energy, you're cold all the time, cold hands and feet, or you might be losing your hair, so you might be getting some hair loss, especially for females. And you've got some of those symptoms. You go to the doctor and they say, no, your thyroid's fine. And that might be because they've only done that one test. So what I would always recommend is to get, a functional medicine practitioner would actually look at, not just the TSH, but actually all your thyroid hormones. There's a panel of about eight hormones there that they would test. And that's, and then you can really know whether there's an issue or not.
So if there is an issue, let's take PCOS as an example. So PCOS is a heightened influence of testosterone in the female hormonal profile. So we've identified a problem within the body. We know that they're there. What happens in terms of the testing of PCOS? Then what happens with the kind of sort of general intervention phase? And what can we expect as an outcome? And the reason why I ask this question is because people might be thinking, oh, I've got PCOS, or there might be a problem. Is it almost like a bit of a death sentence? Like, am I condemned to always being overweight? Or if with the right application, can I see the same results as people without PCOS?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. So there is... if someone has got PCOS, they would have generally, through, as I said, through the medical world, that is treating the symptoms. So, for example, one of the symptoms of PCOS is that they, you might have a really irregular period or not get a period at all, and so therefore you're put on the birth control pill, which is like a band-aid approach. It's not like they say it's regulating a period, but it's not. It's a chemical bleed. It's not a real period. And so therefore it's just, it's actually not making it any better. What we need to find is actually why your hormones have got out of balance. So there's always a reason here. So PCOS has a really big genetic component, but as I mentioned at the start, there's always environmental factors which turn on and off genes, in epigenetics. So we've got to figure out what is the environmental things that are causing those genes to be turned on, which then produce the testosterone and androgens. So instead of just taking medication to cover the symptoms up, that's when you need to work with someone who can actually start to help you understand what are the root causes here. So the main one there is insulin resistance, and this affects 70 to 80% of women with PCOS. And insulin resistance is when your storage hormone insulin, its role is to get glucose when you eat, glucose into your cell. And the analogy that I use here is that insulin's like the keeper of the lock. So if you imagine your cell has always got a door on it and it's locked, and insulin's the only thing that can open up the door to get glucose into the cell. What happens in insulin resistance is that insulin you'll eat and your body will say, right, there's glucose in the blood, insulin, go along and open up the door and let the glucose in. Insulin will get to the door and the lock will have become a little bit jammed and it won't be able to get the door open. So it'll be kind of sitting there wiggling around trying to get the door open, and your body will start to panic. It will say, what's going on, insulin? What the hell? You're slacking around, and so it'll raise more insulin to try and get more someone there with the right key to open the door, or at least barge down the door. So that is what happens in insulin resistance. So when you've got high levels of insulin, that then stimulates your ovaries to overproduce testosterone and androgens, and also causes chronic inflammation, which then affects part of your brain, which controls so your hypothalamus, which controls all your hormone release. So it's got this, massive double impact. So if insulin is one of the causes here, and some of the symptoms of that would be sugar cravings, afternoon fatigue, and feeling like what I would often suffer from was I'd eat breakfast in the morning at 8 o'clock, and by 11 o'clock I'd be absolutely, I would have the massive hangry attacks. I would be sitting in a meeting and I would be ready to rip my colleague's head off because I'd be so hungry. So, feeling kind of shaky, jittery, not being able to regulate your blood sugar, really tired, not recovering from exercise well, because effectively you're starving your muscles. They can't actually get that glucose into them, and then you're making them, like I was, go and do all this aerobic exercise. So those are some of the symptoms of insulin resistance. And so once you actually, that's when, once you know some of the causes, that's when you can use things like diet and exercise modification to actually reverse those causes. So, we're not just looking at a low-calorie diet, but we're actually looking at your carbohydrate intake, because we're saying, all right, okay, your body's not actually able to utilize the glucose, so we might have to reduce that, the amount of carbohydrate you're intaking. And, things like, how do we actually use exercise to help stimulate your cells to be more receptive to the insulin? Well, we know that strength training is a really good way of doing that. So instead of focusing on going for a run for an hour, let's actually get you into the gym and get you actually lifting some heavy weights and doing some deadlifts and squats and some functional movements like that. So this is where, when you know the cause, the root, and I wouldn't say there's just one cause. For most people, there's many causes. But once you know that, then you can actually treat the reason rather than just treating the symptom.
Fascinating. So you mentioned the environment that we've got with the cell and with insulin, and then secondary to that, you mentioned the hormonal problem with testosterone. So is insulin primary and testosterone secondary, or is it we can't really decide, we don't really know, it's a chicken and egg sort of thing? Yeah,
there's conflicting evidence there. So we do know the mechanism behind both. So we know that the ovarian cells have an insulin receptor on them, meaning that they are receptive to insulin. We have shown in studies that when we increase insulin, that then leads to an increase in testosterone, but only in people where they also have the genetic profile for that as well. But then we've also shown that the increased testosterone, so if we just inject more androgens into the body, that then increases insulin as well. So I personally think that there is it's basically like a positive feedback loop here. So insulin causes increased testosterone, and then increased testosterone causes increased insulin. So, but there are, so there's other ways as well. So insulin, we do know that there's another hormone called sex hormone binding globulin, and that's like a sponge for testosterone. So it like whips around the body, and it's supposed to mop up excess testosterone and basically take it to the liver, and for the liver then to deal with it and excrete the excess hormones there. So we know that insulin decreases sex hormone binding globulin. So the kind of analogy that I've used here, that I use often, is that if you think of insulin, it's like a really delinquent child, and the child's come along, it's basically put something in the plug in the bath, turned on the taps full bore, and then it's taken all the sponges, so you can't mop anything up. So we've actually got to then, you can imagine there that there's nothing to mop it up. It's just basically flooding in and causing, causing excess androgens to be made. So we've got to get to the root cause and fix the reason why those androgens are increased as well.
So I want to attach onto this the kind of stress component. Now, in my experience as a practitioner, stress literally exacerbates every problem. It just sends everything into overdrive. So, you mentioned hair loss in earlier on in the podcast, and I've definitely seen not hair loss, but I'm going to call it hair reduction, just like thinning of the hair, and I can just look at that person and go, yeah, you're a bit tired as well. You're a bit stressed. There's all a big connection here. Talk to me about stress and kind of just what we've been talking about and how it can just play havoc, if it does, in your opinion.
Absolutely. It is. So what we're talking about stress here is the long-term stress response, so the increase in cortisol. So you have two stress hormones, adrenaline, which is your short-acting, and then cortisol, which is where your body detects that there's a long-term threat to its survival. So we are still absolutely wired, for where we were living in our ancestors' days on the Sahara, where we were, any threat or any rise in kind of stress hormone was a threat to our survival. So in those days, the only reason why we would have had high cortisol, we didn't have psychological stress back then. The only reason would have been that our life was in danger. So we were being hunted, preyed upon, tribal warfare, famine. And one of the responses of that, so, obviously the body is then raising cortisol. And one of cortisol's actions is to dump glucose into the cell glucose into the bloodstream, so our bodies can then use it to fight and run and flee and do whatever we need to get ourselves out of that physical danger. And, in our kind of modern day life, it's not a physical threat to our life. It's kind of a psychological, emotional, or not enough sleep is, and we've seen that those all kind of increase long-term stress hormone, and so does overtraining. So this is where overtraining, and definitely my background of, training, doing a lot of chronic cardio, so a lot of overtraining there. We do know that can lead to long-term cortisol. So they've done a lot of studies here that show that, aerobic exercise for more than, say, 45 minutes leads to an increase in cortisol, not just during that time, but up to 48 hours afterwards. So that's fine for people who are well adapted, getting enough sleep, able to recover. But if you're doing that every day and you're not getting enough sleep and you're fueling your day with coffee, then you're just basically causing a huge increase in cortisol. So, and a lot of that leads to to weight gain as well. And one of the kind of evidence behind this is that the steroid, so prednisone, which is used for, say, rheumatoid arthritis and asthma and stuff like that, one of the common side effects there is weight gain. And that's because it increases, so prednisone is cortisol, basically the synthetic form of cortisol. And so the way that by way that it increases weight gain is, as I said, it increases the amount of glucose that your body's pumping into the blood. And then, we're not using that. We're just sitting at our desk for 8 hours while we're trying to pump out a report and then, heading to the gym and not getting enough sleep. So this kind of is all how that fuels the cortisol bath that you're soaking in literally every day if you're doing that kind of life.
This is a really hard part of my coaching, I feel, in that getting someone to be really objective and step out of their hamster wheel is really tough. And you've got to, as a coach, you've really got to get someone to take a leap of faith to say, at the moment, we're not 100% sure what's going on. But because you're literally in a war zone with yourself every day, I believe that if we step out, then there's going to be some benefit. And in our group coaching kind of environment, I'll quite often be saying, look, take a week off training, or just, take a couple of nights where you don't go to the gym and you get to bed early and you just nourish yourself, and just see if something happens by the end of the week. And by the end of the week, we might have some weight loss, or someone's just in a better place so that when they go to the gym at the weekend, they actually have the energy to train and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes it's just about to say, there's nothing wrong with giving your body rest. There's only going to be benefit. And when actually we look at the people that live the longest in the world, they are the people that are in the lowest stress environment, that kind of roam around the mountains. I'm not saying we all need to move to the mountains and, herd sheep and shit, but we need to be aware of how much we just throw at our bodies every day. And this is why I use analogies of technology and social media, because while sitting on Facebook is not inherently stressful in and of itself, it might create a lot more stress in the body psychologically and physiologically. If you scrolled on Facebook for 10 minutes, how many messages would you see? Probably 100, 200. How many of those messages might cause you anger or pain or emotion, or just make you irritated, or cause a level of confusion or anxiety? I just think there's a lot more to this.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you there. And I think that, I often find this with, with a lot of my patients is that, and I had this myself, because we're so, if you are suffering from weight gain, and especially where you're feeling like it's spiraling out of control, like you are doing everything right in terms of eating less than what you're expending, and you can sometimes turn to exercise as the way to control that, because it feels like it's the only thing that you can control in this, what otherwise feels like a really uncontrollable situation. And the way that we do that is by, okay, well, if the weight's not coming off, let's increase that more and more. And sometimes it can be really hard to let go of that mentality of, okay, well, if I burn more calories, then I'll be losing weight. But the science is really showing that that doesn't work at all. I don't know if you've seen this, Ben, but there's a really good meta-analysis of there's about 49 studies that they did, and that they found that when they looked at sort of the whole calorie burn side of exercise, of those 49 studies, the summary was basically they studied that the average time was between 3 and 9 months. The amount of exercise they could average out was about 69 hours of exercise, and the average amount of weight loss. This was cardio exercise. Average amount of weight loss was 1 kilogram for 69 hours of work. So we're kind of learning that actually the exercise is fantastic and it's amazing, but I want people to get away from thinking about it as calorie burning, and instead of like more of the epigenetic effect, more of the effect on stimulating insulin resistance or stimulating insulin sensitivity or dampening down the inflammation genes, because that's what the new science is telling us. That's really how we're going to use that. And so if you think about it that way, then taking a break from exercise isn't going to be such a hurdle to get across. You can see then the benefit of it. See that, okay, I need to actually let my body recover. I need to let my cortisol come down so my body doesn't feel like it's in a fright and flight response, and it's not. There is no threat to its survival. It can actually just calm down and let go of some of this weight.
I think there's a big problem here, though, because you've got to think about the environment that we currently live in, which is very sedentary. Yeah. Get in the car, go to work, bimble around the office, come home, and food is tasty. People like it. Snacks are tasty, alcohol's tasty, all of this kind of stuff. And when you let's take a 65 kilo female that might need to consume 16, 17, 1800 calories to maintain her weight. That can be quite hard if you're not organised. If you're not in the kitchen doing your meal prep, because calories on the road is probably going to be more abundant. It's harder to find a low calorie snack that's filling. So we've got this scenario where we're like, actually, I do want to go to the gym and I do want to try and burn 500, 600, 700 calories, because that's one of the only things that's helping me maintain my weight, by having this extreme burn. And I'm not gonna summarize here and say I've got a perfect solution, because I haven't. And this is where the reality is of weight maintenance, is that doing all the right things is really important. Going to bed on time is important. Shopping for your food and making sure you have it and you've done your meal prep is important. And people really have to buy into that for an outcome. I did a video on Facebook the other day called How Doing a Tough Mudder Makes You Fat. And there was a small amount of people that got kind of a bit angry, and it was largely down to the title. But my angle was, and this is my work in general, of making people stand back and think and saying, it's great, you've done a Tough Mudder, brilliant, amazing, but you've got to think about the effects of all these different things that we do. Like, if you do lots of long duration exercise, which you used to do, Claire, and physiologically that puts your body into a spiral that all it wants to do is eat and rest for like 2 days, then doing that one thing that was positive has led to 48 hours of negativity, because you put yourself in such an extreme environment. And this is just what I want people to think about.
Yeah, and you're totally right there, Ben. Like, of that meta-analysis I was talking about, the hypothesis, basically the summary from the researchers was that chronic kind of like high intensity cardio for long periods of time, that actually leads to an overeating of calories after, like basically you overcompensate. And this is not something we can control. It's basically our body just, that is an overcompensation. So I would absolutely agree with you there that it is more about what I want, especially this is what a lot of people think is that, okay, I need to go and be doing lots of high intensity aerobic exercise. So if one HIIT class doesn't help me lose weight, then I'm going to go and do 3 HIIT classes back to back. And that's the kind of mentality that I want people to get away from, is it's not more high intensity, but as you say, like, if you're sitting all day, that's not going to be good. Like, just, so you need to be standing and walking and getting a lot of that low intensity, like, calorie burn. That's where that comes from, not the high intensity, like, long stuff for, like, hours and hours at a time, like what I was doing.
Which is a problem, because we're finding it hard to just be low-level active. But I know what happens if I go out and I do, like, let's say it's the weekend, I go out and do a big walk with my girlfriend, or, I do a Tough Mudder, something that's, out of the norm, it's quite intensive, burns a lot of calories. Yeah, the rest of the day I'm absolutely starving.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people to be able to control that is tough, because it's your body's designed to say, let's eat a lot of stuff, like now, all of it. And you don't crave carrots, do you? Fucking crave cookies, that's what you crave.
That's exactly right. Anything high fat, high sugar, that is what your body, and as I said, like, that's the research has shown this is not something that we can control. It's our internal desire, internal mechanisms, because it's basically how we're wired. We're wired to seek out high fat, high calorie foods because that was their survival mechanism.
Okay, I'm going to summarise on PCOS and where we're at. We've talked about the percentages of population, very important. If people think they're struggling, then there's places that they can go for help. Obviously, they can reach out to you for help. The PCOS Nutritionist.com, that's very easy to remember. You can go to your GP. There's lots of different people that will help. There is this theme that maybe sort of strength and weight bearing exercise is important, along with a lot of just general activity. Yep. Alongside a bit of a lower carbohydrate approach to the diet. Yeah,
for those that are suffering from insulin resistance, what I didn't explain was that, you know, for some people that it is basically a high stress hormone. So we often see this with, with women, especially like myself, or like I see this with a lot of my CrossFit athletes, where they've just, they've started off doing, say, 3 sessions a week, and now they're up to 6 sessions a week, and suddenly they've lost their period and they're gaining weight. And again, it's that stress response, because again, our body's detecting that we're under threat. And what's the first thing it'll do? Well, evolutionary wise, it has to turn off ovulation, because it can't be bringing a baby into that world. So that's why periods will stop, become irregular. So if that's kind of happened to you, if you've normally had quite a regular period and suddenly you're getting a really irregular period, or they've stopped, that's a really good window. Your period is basically a really good window into female health, because it's a really classic sign that there's something not going on there, because, as I said, evolutionary-wise, that was our only mechanism of contraception. Men continue to produce the testosterone. It's women's role to turn off the ovulation to stop a baby coming into the world, because, we do not want, if we're under threat, if we're going into a famine, we do not want to be bringing a baby into that world.
That is my opinion exactly. I think we have to listen to the body. The body tells us the things that are happening, like, if we're getting hair loss and there's not a genetic reason, like, is there a stress component? Is the body struggling to perform a role? Like, if your skin was in a bad condition, well, is there a lot of a particular toxin in your diet? Is your skin struggling to get rid of things? Is it just dry? Like, is it because you're outside all the time and the wind are on your knuckles? Who knows? But if we're willing to find a solution to a problem, then we just look directly at the problem, we stand back, we be objective, we look at all the things that are happening in our environment and say, well, actually, there's probably some stuff I can change here. And as Claire pointed out, functional medicine, it's not just about saying, well, this is the problem. It's about standing back and looking at everything that can feed into that problem, because the body works in an innate way. Everything feeds into one another. And that's why when most people say to me, Ben, what's your number one tip for being, happy, healthy and all that kind of stuff? And I say, just get to bed on time, because if you're lacking sleep, it just fucks everything up.
Yeah. Did you see that study where they showed that one night of less than 5 hours sleep decreases your insulin sensitivity by 30%?
I did not. That is, wow.
Yeah. One night. I can see in the studies, Ben. There's so many that they've done, but it's incredible. So you could literally be doing everything right in terms of getting to the gym, doing your exercise, doing your strength stuff, eating well, but if you're not getting enough sleep, it's going to negate all that good work. So I absolutely agree with you. That would be my one thing as well.
Amazing. Right, Claire, we're wrapping up the show. We've mentioned your website, the PCOSnutritionist.com. Where are you on the social networks? Do you do the social media thing?
Oh, of course, yeah. So I'm on the gram. So I'm just Claire_PCOS Nutritionist on Twitter, but to be honest, I don't really use it. And on the book as well, of course. So just again, the PCOS Nutritionist on Facebook too. But you can find all those links through my website. So it's probably a good place to start.
Sweet. So if you're interested in this topic, go to the PCOSnutritionist.com. You'll find social links, you'll find information, you'll find cool stuff, you'll find information on Claire if you think she is someone that can help. She's obviously a great expert in her field, so feel free to reach out to her. If you see this show on social media, do us the honour of giving it a share. Tag someone in. If you've got a mate that's got potentially a suspected hormonal issue, they're struggling, they don't know, they've got PCOS, tag them into the post. Tag them into the Instagram post. Send them the show. Do the right kind of thing. I would appreciate it because someone gets help. Claire would appreciate it. People get more healthier, and that is the right thing that we want to do. Claire, thanks again for coming on the show. You've been a truly great guest.
Pleasure. Thank you so much, Ben. It's been fabulous being here.
Awesome. Right, to all you people, I will see you next week. Remember at the beginning of the show, if you want awesome information, then this podcast is, of course, the right place to be. Look at the BTM blog, bodytypenutrition.co.uk. If you want information, clarity, and by the way, if you want good tasting supplements, then go to awesomesupplements.co.uk. Otherwise, I will see you next week. And in the meantime, stay awesome. Goodbye. Hey everyone, Ben Radio, episode number 281.